Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar today. While we wait on others to join, if you can tell me in the chat, what is your favorite cause campaign? That way I'll know who's here, as well as what your favorite campaigns are, because we're going to talk about them in a little bit here. Hi, everyone. As we wait to get started, if you can, use the chat function and type in and tell us, what is your favorite campaign? And if you actually have time, which you do, you can tell us why. Okay, great. So we've got our first participant. Thank you, Victoria. Oh, the Moms Campaign by Procter & Gamble. That is a great one. Okay, everybody, as we wait for the webinar to get started, if you can use this time to tell us that you're here in chat by talking about your favorite cause marketing campaign. Okay, so we've got some quiet folks. Anybody want to jump in the chat? Oh, great. Avi, thank you. I knew I could count on you. Riff and McDonald's. I think he's referring to a Happy Meal. Anybody else? So while we wait, I just wanted to get you all in the mindset about thinking about your favorite cause campaigns. So if you get a minute, please type in the chat and let me know what is your favorite campaign of all time. We're going to get started here in just another minute, but in the meantime, welcome everyone and thanks for joining our webinar. We're really excited to share our 2020 research results with you. Oh, that's a great one, Abigail. I'm wearing my Allbirds today, but I bought them before they did the Audubon campaign. Oh, Kmart and March of Dimes. Great. Thank you, Rob. Okay, so I am going to just cover a few housekeeping things, but keep those cause campaigns coming in the chat field. So we are going to be recording today's webinar, and today's webinar is hosted by For Momentum. I'm Michelle Egan, Vice President with For Momentum, and we're going to be discussing key elements of best-in-class cause marketing campaigns. We are so excited because we have three very big brains that are going to be our panelists today. So we're going to use the Q&A function. So as we go through today's webinar, if you want to type in questions in the Q&A, you can do so, and you can do so anonymously if you want. So feel free to do that. Also, the webinar is being recorded, so you all will be given a link to the recording. And then the last piece of housekeeping is in case somebody that you know didn't register in time, we are also broadcasting this on Facebook Live. So you can pop over to Facebook and go to the For Momentum page, and they can watch along. And they can ask questions over there too. So one of my colleagues is monitoring that. So next slide, please. I'm just going to quickly go through what we're going to talk about for the next 58 minutes. I'm going to do introductions, which is what I've started to do right now. We are going to take a tour of the best-in-class cause campaign research findings. It's a very, very dense report. So we are going to be able to talk about some of the key highlights, and we'll touch on each piece of data, but not going too deep. Then, like I mentioned before, we are going to have, we have some fabulous executives from a couple of nonprofits joining us, and we're going to be able to hear their insights related to their experiences, as well as their, we gave them a preview of the research, so they're going to share us a little bit of, give us a little insider information. And then really, most importantly, we're going to take questions from you. This is a wonderful opportunity for you to get really stellar expert advice, not from me, but from the panelists that I'm about to introduce in a few minutes. So I want to tell you real quick about For Momentum. Our agency, if you're not familiar with us, we solely are dedicated to creative and effective partnerships between causes and companies. And we've been doing this work since 2003. Our team has fostered and created over 250 partnerships But truly, our whole goal is to improve the partnership aspects and really have a great impact between these partnerships, between the causes and the companies that they care about. So one of the things that our agency does is every year or 18 months or thereabouts, we invest in a survey and a research project. And our surveys and research projects are all about helping cause practitioners like you and me do a better job. So there's tons of consumer research out there with the business case for cause, and of course we need to use that in our daily practices. But For Momentum's research is really around providing data-driven insights that you and I can use to set expectations with our bosses, with our partners, with our management, with the boards, with stakeholders. And today we're going to really dig deep into what are some of the best-in-class cause campaign elements and what variables and levers you can push and pull to create successful campaigns on your own. And hopefully our goal is to just provide all this data to you, and so you can do a better job with your cause partnerships. And now I'm going to spend just a second talking about those three experts that are going to be on our panel today. First is Molly Ray. She is the For Momentum Agency founder and president, and she's going to be taking us on a quick whirlwind tour through all that data. And then we are so excited that we have two representatives. We've got Munir Pajwani from the Trevor Project, and he's VP of Foundation, Government, and Corporate Partnerships, and he's got great experiences to tell us about. And then we also are very, very happy to have Jill Davis, who has recently taken the role of Chief Revenue Officer at Share Our Strength with their No Kid Hungry campaigns. And so with that, I'm going to say one more thing. I want to remind you all, type in your questions, especially as you're thinking of them as Molly's going through the data. And now I am going to turn it over to Molly to get us started.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I really appreciate that introduction, and I have got a lot of information to unpack here. So my goal is to really give everyone a great tour of the data and leave as much time as I can for the robust discussion of the data. So what I'm sharing with you right now is the table of contents to the survey report itself. So as a registrant to this webinar, you'll be receiving a link to the full data. And as you can see, it's over 33 pages dense, full of highlights. And today my goal is really to share with you the sections here about the participants, the planning and execution elements, the activations, impact and challenges, and the peer-to-peer advice and predictions. And so that's where we'll spend the bulk of our time. But before I do that, I do want to share with you a bit about the methodology of this study. So the goal of this research, as Michelle just touched on, is really to highlight the elements of best-in-class cause campaigns. As we know, there are hundreds and hundreds of campaigns that take place every year, and some are better than others, let's be honest. And so we really wanted to try to benchmark and understand some of the elements and the components of those campaigns that we all strive to achieve. So what we did is we went out to a base of nonprofit experts in the field at organizations who were well known for their best-in-class campaigns. So we certainly borrowed heavily from Engage for Good's Halo Award winners from all the past years. We pulled those kind of campaigns forward, and then just others in the marketplace that we know are great examples. And so that was our base of experts that we wanted to survey. And so the other thing I want to touch on is the timing of this survey. And it's one of those sort of hindsight, we were very blessed and very lucky that we fielded this survey in February. So the survey went live on February 12th and we closed it on March 13th. And for those of you on the phone, I'm sure we all remember it was just later that week when the pandemic was declared a pandemic. And so the important point to make here is that this data was collected without the influence of 2020 and all the things that we've been juggling in 2020. So what I hope this will mean is that it's a good baseline of data that we can use for any sort of cause marketing planning moving forward. And of course, we all know that times are changing in our worlds right now with COVID and with equity and inclusion and all the different things that are going on in the marketplace. And of course, we have to factor in marketplace conditions, but these will still be good bones to build your campaign from. So let me tell you a little bit about the participants. So as I said, I told you how we identified organizations that we know are leaders in cause, and we were really pleased to field 51 surveys. So of the organizations that we reached out to, we had 51 people that completed the survey. They represented 34 different nonprofit organizations, which I'm featuring here in the logo shot. And so I'm sure many of you see your own logo there. Thank you for those of you that participated in the research and are here to hear about it today, but also others that I'm sure you admire. We asked each of the survey participants a number of questions, which I'm going to unpack for you over the course of this time together. But what we did is we asked them to name one cause marketing campaign to benchmark for this data. And what we found is that 51 people identified 47 unique campaigns. So there were only a couple of campaigns that were benchmarked by two different perspectives. And I think what this really shows is a very, if you ask 51 people for their favorite campaign and nearly everyone has a different answer, I think that really speaks to the volume and quality of amazing programs to pull from in the marketplace. Throughout the data, when you see the webinar slides, you're going to see that I've put red circles on some of the highlights that I want to focus on today. When you see the full best-in-class research report, those red circles won't be there anymore. But this is really just my cue as to what are the highlights that I want to touch on today. So the first thing that I want to touch on is that this peer group that we were able to gather insights from is an amazing culmination of experts. And in fact, almost 50%, 49% of our survey respondents have worked on 21 or more cause campaigns. So there is a depth of experience there that we can benefit from. We also wanted to know, where is your area of responsibility? You'll notice in the report that we always list the exact question so you know what the data is remarking to. So the question was, what's the description that most accurately describes your primary area of responsibility? And we see that was about 80% of folks have a development funding title. And it's a very, very experienced group. 45% of this group has been in this career for more than 10 years. And in fact, if you do the rest of the math, 80% have been in their career more than 5 years. So again, it is a very experienced group of professionals. Wanted to know kind of how many years, not just in your cumulative career experience, but in your current position. And we see that the majority of respondents have been in their current position for 6 to 10 years. So now we're going to dive into some of the planning and execution elements, and I want to set this part of the data up. So we asked the question, for the following questions, we would like you to think about one specific cause marketing campaign that you've worked on that you feel was most successful. Was the campaign an independent cause marketing campaign or part of a multi-partner cause platform? We get that question at For Momentum all the time. A lot of our clients think they have to have a multi-partner platform in order to do cause marketing. And so, the answer clearly is you don't have to, because 75% of our respondents identified independent campaigns, which we defined as one partner, one corporation, one nonprofit, one company. But we certainly know that there are many leading multi-partner cause campaigns, and we're going to be talking about some of those later with our panelists. We define those as either a single nonprofit working with multiple companies. So for example, St. Jude Thanks and Giving with multiple partners during the Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday season, or the Shamrocks campaign from MDA with multiple executions with all sorts of different retailers. Or it can also be the flip, where it's one company working with multiple partners. And the example that I cite there is the Subaru Share the Love program, which always features 5 partners every year. So that's the difference between the independent and the multi-partner. So we wanted to know, first and foremost, how much time do you need for planning? And so we asked the question, what sort of amount of time do you need to create an effective strategy and execution? So I want to point out this is not selling time. It's already been sold at this point, right? This is for the planning and execution once you've already decided you're going to move forward, because we certainly have other research about that sales cycle. But once you know that you are going to be doing this partnership, we found that 64% of respondents said that it took between 4 and 12 months to plan and execute the campaign. We wanted to know also who's involved in the planning process in a best-in-class campaign. So this is within the nonprofit structure. From the nonprofit side, which departments were involved in developing the campaign. And what you see here, it's a check all that apply sort of question. So what you see that jumps out at you first and foremost is, you know, a best practice is to involve lots of different departments, right? Don't go off in your own corporate partnership bubble and only work with your team. You got to work across the organization and bring in your peers from different areas. The top 3 areas were 88% said that they involve marketing and communications, 84% have a dedicated corporate partnership team, 76% digital social media, and so forth. This will be great information for you to unpack when you get the full report. But I did want to highlight, I thought this was a best-in-class standard that I wanted to highlight, that 84% of these organizations are organized in such a way that they do have a dedicated corporate partnership team. And I know many nonprofits out there and on the phone don't. You know, many of the nonprofits have you know, broad-based resource development responsibilities, but a best-in-class standard would be able to have dedicated resources just for partnership. And what about the flip side of this? So what departments are involved in campaign development on the corporate side? Well, what jumps out at the top is 90% of the time it involves the marketing and communications teams at the corporate partner. But also closely behind that are public relations and media relations and senior leadership at 70% and so forth. So we certainly know that their best in class, also a practice is for them to involve their counterparts and not just the one person that you're working with. So how long should the campaign last? We get this question a lot. You know, what's the ideal time to be in the marketplace? And this data I thought was very interesting. So we see a pretty even split between 1 month or 3 months. So in that range, those seem to be typical promotional windows. But I was really interested and surprised to see this nearly 1/4 that are actually in the marketplace all the time. They are year round and they're always on. So other answers were things like 1 weekend, or, you know, it's a year round with bump ups, or it's a 3-year multi-year commitment. But this certainly gives you a set of data to demonstrate that 1 to 3 months or always on tend to be the most common answers. Excuse me. So now we're going to move into the nuts and bolts, the activations and the impact and the challenges that we face. So we started out with an open-ended question. We didn't want to salt the deck with a, you know, just check this answer. Like, we wanted to know what was in their heart and what was on their mind when we asked the question, what factors do you feel were most important in making the campaign a success? And when we took those 51 answers of, you know, open-ended, they could say anything they wanted to, they grouped into these natural groupings. And what I want to point out is at the top, we saw the importance of investment by both the nonprofit and the company in the campaign. It can't be a one-sided initiative. And we saw at the very top of the list, also very high on the list, the importance of authenticity. So we provide here some of the open-ended remarks that you can really dig into when you get the full report. But I'm just going to highlight within investment, we see that corporate investment in the marketing campaign on air and print to gain customer support was a huge important success factor, or investment by the nonprofit, or the corporate partner invested marketing dollars to promote the campaign. There's been consistent messaging for 5 years. So these sorts of campaign mutual investments are so crucial. And then the authenticity, some of the comments that were shared were staff being able to pitch the cause in an authentic, concise way, or authentic storytelling. So we know these things from a gut instinct perspective, but it's really great to see what your peer group is saying about this. Okay, this is an eye chart. I'm not going to cover the entire thing, but this is going to be a great tool for you when you get the full report. The question that we asked is, which of the following activations were a part of the campaign that you're thinking about when they're thinking about their best in class campaign? And as you can see, we listed about 20 different variables. We listed a variety of marketing variables, which are all highlighted in blue. We listed fundraising activations, which are highlighted in green, and then we listed other things, like an example of other would be signing a petition or crowdfunding or employee education. But what we see is that a best-in-class standard is to have lots of different types of activations. Clearly, you know, with the numbers that we see here, these best-in-class campaigns are not just a one activation, one-hit wonder. They are a multifaceted initiative. So when we look at just the, remember I showed you that this is everything. Now I'm going to dive into the blue part, which is the marketing activations. And what we see here is something very interesting. First of all, organic, owned, and earned are at the top of the list. So when we're looking at media, organic is at the top of the list, especially social media marketing. Earned, paid media, which we get questions a lot, like how much budget should we have for paid media? And I just want to point out, it's not as prominent as earned and owned is. So that's an important thing to point out. This is I thought this was beautiful. This big red circle here, the nonprofit partner leveraged their owned media 84% of the time, and the company leveraged their media 84% of the time. So we cannot emphasize enough how important it is for both partners to really have skin in the game and really be involved actively in the execution of these campaigns. Now let's look at fundraising. So about 50%, this red circle here, about 50% of the campaigns have some sort of a consumer activation. So it's either a customer donation, a commercial co-venture, a point of sale donation at register. And so, you know, that's good data. But what really jumped out for me is that this top number, 61% had corporate funding or a corporate grant. And again, I hearken back to our experience as an agency and when we're consulting with our nonprofit clients in particular and our corporate clients. Very often there is a concern or there is a practice where a company will only lean on customer donations to fund the campaign. And so I hope that this will be a good conversation guide for you to take to your corporate partner to explain that over 60% of best-in-class campaigns do have a corporate funding or corporate grant element, and then they add on the customer donation part of it to the full campaign. The next question that we asked was, you know, now, the previous question was list everything that applies, you know, what did you do? Now we said, you can only pick one thing. Out of all of this list of 20 plus activations, what was the one single most important activation? And what popped to the very top here is point of sale donation at register or digital checkout. So when you can have a fundraising element like that, that tends to be the most important campaign activation according to our experts' feedback. We also asked what was the biggest impact of the campaign. And here we also have a clear winner, yards ahead of all the other answers. The most important impact, the reason that this campaign existed was to raise funds for the nonprofit. So we certainly want to raise awareness about our issues, that we are our mission space, what we're doing. But I think a benchmark for best in class is that there will be a fundraising element involved. The question is always at the front of our minds is how much money can we raise? And in fact, I have many clients that we work with who want to establish a standard that they won't work with anyone unless it raises at least $250,000 or some number that they've come up with they feel is the right size for their organization. What I want to point out is that these 47 benchmarked campaigns had a wide range of answers. But I think you can kind of see a natural grouping here from 250 to 2 million. That's sort of the most common numbers. But I think what this also says, because of the range of answers, is there's not one magic number, right? It can be successful at many different fundraising levels. But I know that one of the things that is on the mind of a lot of nonprofits is Gosh, I know we would all love to have $1 million campaigns, right? I mean, $1 million would be a great, great benchmark. And in fact, among these best in class campaigns, 60% did raise $1 million or more. And that got me thinking and got me curious. And so, you know, we had the open-ended answers of what these 47 campaigns are. We're not revealing what they are because our survey participants asked us not to reveal that data. So we're staying true to that data. Or that request. But we went and looked back and we picked the 47 campaigns, and we picked specifically all the campaigns that raised over $1 million. And using publicly available data, we looked at how long those campaigns have been in the marketplace. And what we can tell you is that 2/3 of the $1 million plus campaigns have been in the marketplace for at least 5 years. So I want you to really hear me on that. It's very important to recognize that you're not necessarily going to have $1 million campaign the first year out of the gate, but it can be a goal that you can strive to. And in fact, 60% of those campaigns that raised over $1 million have been in the marketplace 5 years or more. Okay, here's another eye chart that I'm not going to unpack the whole thing, but I want to give you a flavor of this so that when you get the data later, you'll know what to look for. So we asked a series of questions, 13 different factors, to understand more about the strategy that goes into the planning process. And then we tried to see if there were any big answers, you know, any big trends. And the answers were largely all over the board, but I'm going to give you an example of just one, and then I'm going to unpack the data a little bit more. So for example, was the campaign created in response to a timely issue, or was it focused on a long-standing issue? And then what we've done is we've highlighted whichever number got the biggest percentage, so that when you go through the data and you really, you know, have a chance to look at this, it might help. I think it will help with your planning. But one thing that jumped out at the top to me was that it was very clear. One set of circumstances were very clear, and that was that over 80% of the time, the company and the nonprofit were both involved in campaign planning. And nearly 80% of the time, the company and the nonprofit were both involved in the campaign execution. So it's really important, again, these best-in-class campaigns, both partners come to the table for planning, and both partners are active in the execution of the campaigns. The other ones, I tried to draw some top-line insights for you here, and I think what we can show is here at the top, the 98%, the 94%, the 94%. More than 90% of campaigns featured messaging and imagery that is positive and uplifting. 98% of the time, the messaging is positive and uplifting. 94% of the time, it's centered on long-standing issues. And 94% of the time, it's centered around a safe or conventional cause. And so we were just trying to get some insights there. Also, the rest of them were more than 50% of the time, they featured approachable messaging, they targeted a broad audience, they achieved substantial funding, they generated an emotional response, they leveraged heavy employee engagement, and they involved multiple activations. So those are some planning nuances that I hope will help you as you plan your next best-in-class cause campaign. We asked another open-ended question about challenges, because we all, you know, when we go to conferences and when we hear these types of presentations, so often we hear about the glory, but we want to hear about the hard part too, because the hard part, it really helps you with your planning. And so we asked the question, what's the biggest challenge you faced with the cause marketing campaign, and how did you overcome it? And again, it completely open-ended. They could type in anything they wanted. And these 51 professionals, we were able to group these answers into 2 big buckets: operational challenges and activation challenges. And then the second one is managing relationships and expectations of the corporate partner. And I will tell you, when I talk to my client base, my friends in the space, this is so true. I know this to be true. It was nice to see it be affirmed. So in the operational challenges side of the equation, things like And this clearly is a multi-partner campaign. So activation of all the partners was tough and uneven. Alignment and coordination between marketing and development because of competing priorities and different timelines. I mean, that one is alive and well in every organization I've ever met. I think it's a challenge too. You've got to work with all your colleagues, but sometimes it can be a challenge. Limitations on how the nonprofit is able to promote the campaign. And that can be a real deal breaker. You know, I know sometimes organizations get very conservative and it's very hard to break through that to have a meaningful cost marketing campaign, and it's showing up in this data. On the managing relationship and expectations of the partner part, I've heard this one a lot too. Our corporate partner expected us to execute and manage much more of the campaign than initially expected, and they viewed us in part as an agency and an extension of their team. So we as nonprofits are really being asked to step up and act like an agency, and that can be challenging. And then last but not least, I want to close out the highlights of the data with a bit of future thinking advice, future forward advice. So what the question was, in your opinion, how might cause marketing campaigns need to evolve in the next 5 years in order to be relevant and have an impact? And so again, these were open-ended questions, but we were able to kind of put the data into categories. And what we see as popping to the top is the importance of leveraging digital strategies and emerging technologies. And let's unpack that a little bit. So the commentary were things like, as digital and e-commerce retail options increase in adoption and use, so does the need to focus on these areas within the cause space. Or cause campaigns will need to be easily executed digitally and via social media. We are in a digital transformation, so we're looking at quick, easy activations as well as different methods of communication such as live streaming, virtual reality, texting, etc. And will need to be factored into as the landscape changes. And I think we've seen that this year more than ever with events having to go virtual and other things moving more into the digital space. I think the future just moved forward, accelerated forward faster than we even knew. So there's a part of the study that I'm not going to go over in this webinar format, but I want to just give you a shout out to it so you will look at it when you receive the report. We asked the questions just open-ended. What advice could you give to your peers in this space? What advice for success? And we have several pages of highlights of that data, just peer-to-peer advice that I think you will really enjoy taking a look at when you get the full report. So Michelle, that is the top line tour. I hope that I struck a nice balance of not talking too fast, but covering a good amount of the data to set up this fabulous panel discussion that we're going to have now.
Thanks, Molly. You did oops, hold on. Thanks, Molly. You did a great job. And I think you talked at the appropriate speed because we got a couple of questions that like quoted exactly what was on the screen and or what you said. But as Molly mentioned, you know, there's a lot more data here, but we are going to turn it over now to hear from each of our panelists. We've asked Munir to prepare a brief remarks on 2 of his campaigns, and then we're going to hear the same thing from Jill about 2 of their campaigns, and then we're going to get into the questions. So take it away.
Great. Thank you, Michelle, and thanks, Molly, for having me on this panel. So I'm going to spend the next 60 minutes just talking a little bit about the Abercrombie & Fitch model that we have with the Trevor Project. So before I even go into that, for those of you who don't know, the Trevor Project is the world's largest suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for LGBTQ young people under the age of 25. Our core service is to make sure that we're there for LGBTQ youth in their moment of crisis and to support them out of it. We also provide education, research, advocacy, as well as a social media platform called Trevor Space, which is a global platform allowing peer community to be built online. So some of you, I'm looking at the attendees list and I see a lot of familiar faces. Dave, nice to see you. Michelle Fino, nice to see you as well. And I think my entire development team is on here as well. So thanks for coming to support me. So some of this might be redundant to some of you who've heard me talk about this before, but but this is our most robust and gold star of a partnership amongst the many amazing cause partnerships that we have. So I really love talking about this partnership because the way that we have engaged our corporate partner in becoming a really core partner to our organization has been really wonderful to see over the last specifically 3 years. So in the first 7 years of our partnership, we were essentially a beneficiary. We were giving access to our mission, to our logo, to our brand, so Abercrombie could use their stores and their brand to raise money for us and raise awareness. And then we decided that, hey, this is a really great opportunity for us to influence the messaging that Abercrombie is using to promote the core values of the organization. And as many of you might know, Abercrombie has had quite a bit of a history with not being the most inclusive brand. And they've really invested in making sure that over the last 7 years specifically, they have done a really good job of making their brand values be incredibly inclusive by partnering with organizations that are doing really authentic and meaningful work. So the goal of our partnership with Abercrombie has always been to raise money for the Trevor Project, to increase awareness about our mission. But over the last 3 years, we've really dedicated to make sure that we are a partner to them, to engage them in a very authentic conversation about how they can show up for the LGBTQ community. Our community is very political. They are very much activisty. They are not afraid to speak their mind. So we definitely received a lot of feedback from our audience saying that, why are you partnering with a company like Abercrombie & Fitch? So we had to really change that conversation. So the first thing that we did was we showed up to the table as a partner and not just as a beneficiary. And what that meant was really showing up as an expert and asking Abercrombie to really lean into our expertise of how to make this campaign really authentic. And that included a very honest conversation about their brand perception. So we had to take screenshots of what people were saying on social media to show to them, this is the perception, so how do we change that perception? And they asked us, well, you tell us, how do you change it? How should we change it? And that was a great place for us to start. So one of the things that we did was we introduced them to our army of influencers who are incredibly diverse. And Molly, if you go to the next slide, I want to show this great image, which highlights a lot of numbers, which you can read, and I won't go over them. But the folks that you see at the bottom are social media influencers, celebrities, and this is the most diverse cast of supporters for our campaign in our history of working with Abercrombie. And we put this entire group together. So this includes the most racially diverse influencers. This includes more gender diverse influencers, as well as size diverse influencers. So when our audience asked us, hey, why are you working with Abercrombie? We can point to this and say, we're actually helping Abercrombie change their narrative, change their messaging to be more inclusive. We're using our place at the table to influence the natural and the national conversation about LGBTQ allyship. And of course, that resulted in amazing press for Abercrombie, where they were celebrated for being really bold and being really open-minded about the ways that they are supporting the Trevor Project, but largely addressing their historical issues around inclusivity, as well as LGBTQ allyship. And I'll go into more details about the partnership when we go into the actual Q&A, but I also want to highlight one other thing that we did this Pride season that might be really helpful for a lot of the folks on the audience, which is that this Pride season was an incredibly difficult, but also a great opportunity for our organization to take a stance, a very values-based stance. So the weekend before we were about to launch all 50 plus of our Pride campaigns, Black Lives Matter protests broke out around the country. Of course, it felt very off-tone for us to be celebratory during this time, to launch campaigns talking about a party and talking about how amazing it is to be LGBTQ, and to send out these positive messages, knowing that there are Black LGBTQ people who don't feel the same and who are suffering and who are seeing people who look like them be murdered by police and be violently attacked. So we asked all of our partners to pause their campaigns. This was a very difficult decision to make, but it was a values-based decision to make. And I think this is one of the lessons that we can all take as we enter this new world where people are a lot more engaged in the mission and the cause of the time, and they're expecting nonprofit partners to defend that cause. So we definitely engage in a lot of difficult conversations with our partners. But one thing that we did was we supported our partners. We showed up as a partner again and sent them a weekly memo called On Pride and Protest, which included our position on the issue, what we were doing internally to support Black LGBTQ young people, what we were advising our partners to do at this time, whether that's pausing their campaigns, changing their messaging, finding other organizations who are Black specific to support, as well as figuring out how to really just pivot a campaign with a few days notice. So this ended up being a very difficult time for our team, but ultimately received great feedback from our partners who said, thank you for giving this advice to us. us because we had no idea what to do. And you helped us navigate this very difficult time.
Thank you, Munir, so much. That's fantastic. And I love that, you know, the pausing takes a lot of, you know, guts, and also it's the right thing to do, and providing, you know, being really the voice of the audience, super important. So we're going to get into that in a little bit, but now I'm going to turn it over to Jill Davis, who's going to talk to us briefly about two of her campaigns with Share Our Strength.
Great. Thank you, Michelle, and thanks to the whole Form Momentum team for the invitation today. Again, for those of you who might not know a lot about Share Our Strength and our No Kid Hungry campaign, we are dedicated to ending childhood hunger in America. Prior to the pandemic, our work looked like school breakfast, school lunch, after school, and summer meals, and making sure that children had access to healthy meals 365 days a year. After the pandemic, our work is the same. We've been often saying this is the moment that Share Our Strength was built for, and now we're just connecting children to meals in different places, whether they're in school in person or whether they're in virtual classrooms. So today I'm going to highlight for you guys two of our multi-platform campaigns. So Share Our Strength and the No Kid Hungry campaign, we have a great history rooted in corporate partnerships. We have some of the most fantastic individual activations with our partners. But one of the things we really were hearing from our partners is, when are you going to flex your marketing muscle for us? Because we're lucky enough and have the advantage of having so many of our corporate partners do flex their marketing muscle on behalf of No Kid Hungry. And as some of the research showed, they were expecting us to do the same. And we knew with the resources that we had, that was really important, but we also knew we couldn't do it for everyone in the same way. So we've taken the approach of creating some multi-partner platforms that allow us to do just that, to highlight partners in very specific ways, allow them to activate in customized ways, but allows us to activate our marketing muscle in a more unified and singular way. So first, I'm going to talk for a minute about Dine Live and talk a little bit about 2019 and what that looked like. And then as we get into the Q&A, I'll talk a little bit more about what 2020 looks like for this campaign as we're live in the marketplace now. So in September of 2019, we challenged ourselves to reimagine the approach to our largest annual fundraiser, Dine for No Kid Hungry. This had previously been a roadshow with physical events across the country. And in 2019, we transformed it into a live stream kickoff event, complete with celebrity star power. Our main goal here was to increase the national awareness of Dine for No Kid Hungry and drive traffic to the campaign landing page. And what that campaign landing page, why that was so important, is that's where each individual partner activation company was highlighted. So by driving traffic to one singular page, every single company that was participating with their own unique activation was allowed to be highlighted. And I'll say the results surpassed the prior year's reach really significantly. The campaign landing page received 170,000 plus visits throughout the month of September. In 2019, this campaign did last for a month. We saw this number of visits is about a 550% increase from the previous year. We saw about 212 million media impressions, over 20 media placements, including features in People and the Today Show. And one of the things that was really important here, and Molly referenced this in some of the research too around, we really leveraged our earned and owned media. I will be transparent though and say, you know, we did do a little bit of paid media in both of the campaigns I'm going to highlight here. And the reason we did that is we're really starting to see a trend that if you want specific partner names and activation mentioned, most media is only doing that through paid media. So that's just something to think about, and we'll see how that trend evolves over time. Next slide, please. So I'm also going to talk about a second multi-partner platform that we have here, our Powered by Breakfast platform and campaign. So again, I'm going to highlight here the 2019 campaign, and we'll talk in a minute about 2020. So what we did with our Powered by Breakfast campaign is we took a moment to leverage our largest programmatic focus, school breakfast. And we really wanted to think about a unique campaign that accomplished a few things. We were looking to engage consumers, corporate partners, and stakeholders to raise awareness of the importance of school breakfast. They're really thinking about the power of what fueling a child in breakfast does, and therefore our Powered by Breakfast campaign was launched. One of the things that was unique about our Powered by Breakfast campaign that is a little bit different from what Dine Live looked like in 2019 is this was a campaign that was co-created across our entire organization. So of course we worked with our amazingly talented communications and marketing team, but we also worked closely with our program team. We really wanted this to be something that the organization could leverage across every audience so that we really could put our full power and weight behind that. We also really, when we think about leadership and purpose partnerships, our team strives to really stay laser focused on meeting our corporate partner business needs. And so this allowed us to engage our corporate partners in a way that experienced a lift in visibility of their support, while each one of them was able to connect with their consumers in a meaningful way to them. In the end, when we looking back on this campaign, we exceeded our initial goals for year one. Our goal was to have 5 unique corporate partners activate in this first time campaign. We were able to secure 6 corporate partners, and our launch event generated 33 media placements, including USA Today and Telemundo. And we're really thrilled at how we see this being a tentpole campaign for our organization moving forward. So looking forward to talking with you guys more in the larger Q&A section.
Great. Oh. Thank you so much. I still see Jill, but that's okay. So I am gonna now turn over, actually, let me back up. So Jill, so important, the one thing that you said about you always focus on meeting your corporate partner business needs. And I think that that is so important for all of us, you know, just as a good reminder. So now we're gonna move into our panel discussion. We have prepared, well, we've given a little preview of the data to Munir and to Jill. And so we've prepared a couple of questions for them. And then we want to really save time to get to your questions. So the first one is for Munir. Our research found that nearly all of the participants who have best-in-class campaigns say that they have to involve the partner, the corporate partner, and the nonprofit, the cause, in planning. Can you share a little bit about how you and your partner were tag teaming, you know, during the planning process? And then if there's any lessons learned about perhaps something you might not have done that you do differently next time?
Absolutely, and I'll try and speak as fast as I can and as clearly as I can, because we only have 15 minutes left. So first and foremost, I think you have to align your internal team on your entire business model. I think getting your marketing, creative, and comms team to back you up when a brand partner is asking you to be a quote agency, you have to get their buy-in, otherwise you're just not going to work. And I think one of the arguments that you can make is, yeah, we're raising $1 million for this partnership, so you have to do it. That is not an inspiring message to the team, because their job is to promote the mission of the organization. Their job is to really further the work that we do as an organization that's serving LGBTQ young people. So the angle you should always take is find out how this brand partnership is going to help further our mission. So, and for example, for Abercrombie & Fitch, we always talked about internally as how much power we have as their key partner, the key LGBTQ partner, to change the narrative about how Abercrombie is perceived as a brand, but also how much power we can position ourselves as to drive the conversation on LGBTQ youth suicide. Abercrombie has hundreds of stores in all kinds of places around the country, especially in rural areas, suburban areas, and urban areas, places that we may not be able to reach. Abercrombie stores are visited by parents who may not know about the Trevor Project. So these are some of the ways that we can get our messages out. And I think when you take that angle and that approach to get your team's buy-in, you get a lot more motivated people to support you in being an agency. Second of all, which is not to position yourself as an agency. I think you should always position yourself as a cause expert, but not somebody that's an extension of their marketing agency or marketing team. And I think one way to do that, which is my second point, is to make sure that when you're negotiating the contract terms, it's very clearly laid out what your role is in this partnership. So we always say, what is your planning process? Walk us through, when does your ideation start? Who has the approvals in it? How many times do we get to meet? Where do we have the opportunity to give you approvals? All of those things should be laid out at the onset of the partnership, so that you're not walking in and then being surprised by, oh, you have to get on a weekly 3-hour brainstorm with their creative team. That should not happen. That's not our job. And I think drawing those boundaries is really, really important. And I think when I look at the Abercrombie campaign, we had our creative team, our comms team, our marketing team, as well as their creative team, their collection team, their design team, all of them were involved in this entire process. But we met with them on a weekly basis just as an update. But there were specific moments where they brought us to their Columbus, Ohio headquarters, where we could really talk about what this campaign is going to look like. So a lot of what we did was we were at the table giving them our expertise on how LGBTQ people and how LGBTQ youth would receive this message and receive this campaign. So that means if you're positioning yourself as an expert, you have to be able to give them the bad news. You have to be able to say, hey, this thing that you have in mind is just not going to work. And here are the reasons why. This is what our data shows. This is what our experience shows. And here are examples of how you have failed in previous partnerships where they've taken a specific approach. Share those examples. Be really transparent with your partners. And sometimes that can happen in a group. Sometimes you have to have one-on-one conversations with senior leaders. And I've done both. And I think it's really important to empower your team as well to have those conversations. It should not be that just because I'm a VP, I should be able to have those difficult conversations. Our managers have all the skills necessary to be at that table and push back and say, this is what's going to make this campaign authentic.
Fantastic advice. That was right there worth the price of admission. So now I'm going to switch it over to Jill. And Jill, not to put too much pressure on you, but you know, some of the questions that Molly went through in the research, and some of the questions that we receive often as an agency is around the bucket of timing, both timing for how long should it take me to plan in a way that like Manir was just describing, and also timing in terms of how long should my campaign be in the marketplace. So could you, I know that you have the spectrum of 1 day, full months, always on. Could you talk to us a little bit about what your experience is and what insights you might have?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Michelle, there we go. So I'll talk a little bit about planning in just what we see here. I really think that if you think about how to build the ideal timeline, in my experience, it should be based on the call to action. You can't just say, I'm planning a campaign and most campaigns should be 30 days. What's the ask that you're making of the audience? And that should really drive your planning timeline. So what are the assets that you need to leverage for that call to action to be successful? How long will it take to secure the internal and external resources for both the nonprofit and the partner? Even though we're not talking about the selling timeline, you do have to factor in buy-in timeline. So again, how long will it take to create audience buy-in? Again, maybe internally and externally. And really then many times after you start that initial campaign launch, the timeline for future campaigns is built from your debrief. Thinking for a minute about how long your campaign should be in the marketplace. Again, I think we should be careful about looking at averages and comparing ourselves to other organizations. In my experience, our most successful campaigns, both the independent campaigns and the multi-partner campaigns, timing was driven again by the campaign objectives and a specific call to action. For example, in some of our independent campaigns that are focused on lifting sales volume for a partner, they may stay in the marketplace longer because it may take longer to achieve that objective. Those that are driven by customer donations, again, both independent and multi-partner platforms, we see success when those tend to have a shorter timeline, because you're going to think about how often that customer visits that establishment and how likely they are to donate more than once. And then just briefly, I say, when I think about the future, you know, and we know that nimbleness and authenticity will be key moving forward and can easily impact timelines. I also think there's a real desire for less produced content and more organic content, and that could have a really positive impact on timelines moving forward. We're seeing that right now. Our Dine for No Kid Hungry campaign is live this year called Dine, Shop, Share. It's we had a campaign plan before the pandemic. We had to quickly shift to ensure our message was right, that our resources were flexible, and that we were really listening to our audiences. And again, we're able to really leverage organic content there, which gave us a lot of flexibility in our timeline.
Fantastic. Really, really good advice. Okay, I'm going to ask Munir one more question, and then we'll turn it, and I've got one more for Jill, and then we'll take audience questions. So thinking about digital strategies and emerging technologies, Molly noted in the research that even pre-COVID, best-in-class cause campaign practitioners were thinking about these kinds of how important these kinds of strategies were. So could you talk a little bit about how you see this evolving, and or perhaps have you adapted anything recently in response to digital strategies and or emerging technologies that have that you've turned on?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the complexities of the Trevor Project is that we serve a variety of audiences. The young people that we serve are Gen Z. They have never known the dial-up generation. They have no idea what AOL is. So they've been connected to lots of technologies all the time. But we also serve adult supporters who give anywhere from $5 a month to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on their capacity, as well as corporate partners, as well as institutional supporters. So our communication tactics have to be really customized to each of those. So when we think about specifically serving young people, we're always looking at what's coming up next. And two of the platforms that we're really engaging in right now are TikTok and Twitch. TikTok, I'm sure most of you have seen the 30-second videos where people are just doing random dances to videos. And it's hugely popular, especially over the last 6-7 months. And then Twitch is a live stream platform for gamers, where people essentially live stream their gameplays and people sort of build a community around it. Both of those platforms offer us a chance to reach two very different audiences. And we have partnerships with both companies. And both of the companies have come to us and said, hey, can you create content for our platform? And the more research we did, the more we found that it's actually not worth it for us to create content. So I would advise that as you are looking at emerging technologies, first identify the audience that you're trying to reach. Because if your audience is 50 plus, you don't need to be on TikTok. It doesn't really make sense unless if there's a reason for you to be on TikTok, right? Secondly, once you identify that audience, figure out how you want to engage that audience on the platform using what's already on the platform. This is the classic influencer strategy, where you use influencers on those platforms to promote your message. The benefit that Trevor Project has is that we have hundreds of thousands of supporters all over the world because of our mission, because everybody has some sort of connection to struggling to come out with their identity and being okay with who they are. So we have lots of young content creators on TikTok and Twitch who are more than willing to support the Trevor Project. So all our team does is reaches out to them and give them an incentive to create a program or do fundraising on the platform or raise awareness on that platform. So one of the advice is always really looking at platforms and how you want to engage the audience that's already on there. But broadly speaking, I think that there is a world in where there's a lot of emerging technology in improving the programs of a nonprofit that are also incredibly important. So an example is we're working with Google.org that is helping us use artificial intelligence to identify youth at highest risk of suicide when they call or text our hotline. This helps us really make sure that we're using the best-in-class technologies to save lives. And when a lot of nonprofits are looking at tech investments, they're really not looking at how to partner with these really incredible organizations like Google, who have the technology and the expertise. And if we're able to offer some level of assurance to them that we have the team and the leadership and the desire to commit to it, they will use their expertise to support your mission.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And Jill, I've got one more question for you. Let's talk about like some of the nitty-gritty fundraising elements of best-in-class campaigns. The research showed that the over 60% of the campaigns did not solely rely on a customer or a consumer action to fundraise. So there was a corporate commitment. The corporations they had some skin in the game. Can you talk a little bit about how that holds true in your experience, or if it doesn't? And then if you, outside of fundraising, what other activations are important and some of the successes of your campaigns?
Yeah, so I think this is more true than ever. I expect that we're going to see customer engagement maybe becoming equally and maybe even more relevant than customer donations. I'm sure so many of you in the audience have seen, there's a lot of conversations about customers wanting to really see a company put their own skin in the game and to stand up for something, as opposed to just raising funds, which in some cases may be seen as taking credit for the funds raised off the back of their customers. We are seeing more and more corporate commitments and donations that are either flat donations or those that are triggered through the action of a customer or a donor audience. So either via social media, via a purchase, via an employee action. So I do think that is a trend that's absolutely going to continue. I also think when we think about what activations outside of fundraising are important, we try to be really clear at the beginning of our campaign creation. Who are the audiences that we are trying to connect with? And is there a very clear and specific call to action for each one? So how can that corporate partner's employee get involved? How can their customer get involved? If it's a campaign that allows for vendor involvement. So really just make sure that in each element outside of fundraising, it's very clear how each specific audience can get involved. And I think that's really important in creating buy-in, especially in these corporate partner pieces, that there is an employee call to action outside of fundraising.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to do 2 quick questions. Munir, first one for you from Jim Andrews. He said that, I'm paraphrasing, so, and you have to quickly answer, but did the Abercrombie and Fitch campaign meet its brand objective?
They absolutely did, and actually just asked my team if we have those data points, and we don't, but I will get those. But just looking anecdotally to the comments on the Instagram page, on the Facebook page, if you look 2 years ago, there were a lot of sort of questions around why we're partnering with them. Now there's a lot more validating and celebratory comments about how amazing Abercrombie is in supporting the Trevor Project, and also highlighting folks of different sizes, folks of different colors, and making sure that their campaign represents people of all identities that are representative of the LGBTQ community.
Fantastic. Okay, I was trying to look for another quick answer one. Kim Hiroshi asks, and Jill, maybe you can answer this one because you talked about the marketing muscle of Share Our Strength. When discussing the need for paid media to support your campaigns, do you have challenges getting leadership to approve the budget, or does your leadership say, yes, we know that we need to make this investment because it's going to help all boats rise?
It was an evolution over time. I'll be really honest. You know, when we first started thinking about creating our own multi-partner platform, we had a lot of education to do as a leadership team. We had to talk a lot about the value. We had to talk a lot about the ROI, and we had to set bold revenue goals for ourselves. So we were able eventually to get a limited resource budget for paid media, but we took it as a moment to educate our entire leadership team, and we took it, we knew it was going to be a long lead time internally too. We started selling this idea for quite some time before we ever even sold it to partners.
Gotcha. Great. Hey, Molly, can you go to the next slide, please? We are going to, looking at time, we are going to wrap up. We had so many fantastic questions, and our team will try to get some of the answers and provide the answers to you. The other thing that I need to say once again is that everybody who registered for this webinar is going to get the full data set and research copy a little bit later today. You'll also have access to the recording. And as I mentioned, For Momentum's investment in research, we have lots of other free resources on our site. If you need any of those, just go to our site and download. So now in the last 90 seconds, each one of our panelists has a few seconds to give us the last words of sage advice. Munir, I think, Jill, will you go first, please?
Sure. So in being brief, I would say I have 3 points of advice. Be authentic, be bold, and be flexible. So don't do something that isn't grounded in your core values and in the core values of your partner. That's your North Star. On being bold, think big. This is a whole new fundraising environment, and we get to make the rules. There are no rules right now, so we get to create them together. And then if it hasn't been said enough in 2020, flexibility is going to be key. Flexibility for yourself, for your organization, for your employees as we work to take care of each other, and for your partner.
Thank you. Munir?
Great. I will +1 everything that Jill said and just add that this is the time to double down on your mission to drive an authentic message. This is not the time to compromise and negotiate what language works with the audience. Consumers and people that are supporters of your mission are looking for you to defend the mission and really engage in meaningful conversations about the cause that they're trying to support. So don't let companies dilute your message.
Thank you. And Molly, can you take us home?
Yeah, I'll just round it out by saying, I know that this partnership work is hard and it's meaningful and it takes a lot of creativity and resources, but my advice is don't go it alone. What our research shows us is that both within the nonprofit structure as well as in the corporate structure, it takes a team. And it's really through that multifaceted participation that success and best-in-class cause campaigns result. Thank you, everybody, so much for coming. We really appreciate your interest and your questions.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye. Thanks, guys.